Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to another lesson. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you about relative clauses. Now, by the end of this lesson, I hope you will be able to explain what a relative clause is, what we use relative clauses for, how to form relative clauses, and give examples of relative clauses. But before we begin the lesson, please subscribe to the channel. Have you subscribed? Okay, thank you. Now, let us begin. We use relative clauses to specify who or what you are talking about. So if you want to be very specific about who you're talking about or what it is that you're talking about, then use relative clauses. If you want to let someone know exactly who it is that you're talking about or what it is that you're talking about, use relative clauses. But we also use relative clauses to give more information or more details about a person or a thing. So we have two functions when it comes to relative clauses. The first function is to specify who or what we are talking about, and the second function is to give extra details or more information about a person or a thing. How do we do that? Now, look at the examples on the right. It is the man who I saw yesterday. B. It is the dog which has just barked. C. Here is the car which I bought last year. D. There is the dentist to whom I went to have my tooth removed. E. Here is the man to whom we sold our old car. F. There is the boy whose father is sick. G. It is the cat whose owner visited us. H. She is the girl that who bullied me. I. It is the cow that or which I milked. And J. This is the tooth that or which is broken. Now, I will explain number one a little bit further, but before I do that, let us look at number two. Use relative pronouns to form relative clauses. So now that you know what we use relative clauses for, that is to specify who it is or what we are talking about, and to give extra details about a person or a thing, how do you actually how do you make relative clauses? You do that by using relative pronouns. And I'm sure you're now asking yourself, what are relative pronouns? Now, I have actually uploaded a video on relative pronouns, a very detailed lesson on relative pronouns. So feel free to have a look at that video. Now, but for the sake of this lesson, relative pronouns include number 2A, who, and we use the relative pronoun who only for people. Okay, when we want to give extra information about people, or when we want to be very specific about which particular person we're talking about, then we use the relative pronoun who. And then we have the relative pronoun which, number 2, be. Now, we use this pronoun which when we want to give extra details, or when we want to be very specific about which animals we are talking about or things. And then C, we use the relative pronoun whom when we want to be very specific about people and give extra details or extra information about people. And then D, we have the relative pronoun whose. We use the relative pronoun whose when we want to give extra details about people and animals. And finally, we have the relative pronoun that. We use this pronoun to give extra details, or when we want to be very specific about what person or which people we are talking about, which animal we are talking about, and what thing we are talking about. So very briefly, we have 5 different relative pronouns. That is who, which, whom, whose, and that. Okay? And we use each relative pronouns for a specific group. Okay? Now that we know what we use relative clauses for, and that we use relative pronouns to form relative clauses, how do we actually do it? So let us now look once more very closely at the examples on the right. It is the man who I saw yesterday. Okay, so in this case, there are a number of men who are standing somewhere, and you want to be very specific about which man you're talking about. So in that case, you say, it is the man who I saw yesterday. So that one. It is the man who I saw yesterday. Maybe someone asks you, by the way, which man did you see yesterday? Which man did you see? And then you can say, it is the man who I saw yesterday. It is him. It is the man who I saw yesterday. So in that case, you're trying to be very specific about which particular man you're talking about, to make sure that someone understands. I'm talking about that one, that man. It is the man who I saw yesterday. So that is a relative clause that is giving us very specific information about which particular person it is that you're talking about. And then B, it is the dog which has just barked. It is the dog which has just barked. So imagine that there are a group of dogs, okay? Very many dogs. And you want someone to know exactly which particular dog you're talking about. So once more, you can point your finger at the dog and say, it is the dog, this one. It is the dog which has just barked. And in the first example, we use who because we are talking about a man. Remember 2A. We use who only for people, okay? And in B, we use which because we are talking about an animal. Remember 2B, the relative pronoun 2B. And then in the next example, here is the car which I bought last year. Here is the car which I bought last year. In this case, we're talking about a car. A car is a thing, and therefore we use the pronoun which. Remember 2B. Here is the car which I bought last year. However, we could also say, for example, B, it is the dog that has just barked. That is also correct because if you look at 2E, we use that for people, animals, and things. And likewise, C, we could also say, here is the car that I bought last year. okay, because a car is a thing, and we use that also for people, animals, and things. Now, D. There is the dentist to whom I went to have my tooth removed. So imagine that there are several dentists, okay, and you want to be very specific about which dentist it is that you're talking about. So then you would say, there, you see there is the dentist to whom I went to have my tooth removed. So it is not that one, but this one. There is the dentist, okay, to whom I went to have my tooth removed. Now, whom is a very special relative pronoun because we always combine it with a preposition, okay? We always combine whom with a preposition. So if you want to know more about that, have a look at the video I have uploaded about relative pronouns. Now, in example D, we are talking about a dentist. It is a person, and for that reason, we use whom. Now, E, here is the man to whom we sold our old car, okay? So there are several men, and you want to be very specific about which particular man you sold your old car to. So then you would say, here is the man to whom we sold our old car. So that relative clause provides us with extra details about which particular man. It's very specific. It helps us to be very specific about which man we are talking about. Okay, and again, man is a person, so you use the personal, you use the relative pronoun who, okay? And remember once more, we always combine the relative pronoun whom with a preposition, and that is to. Now, F, there is the boy whose father is sick. There is the boy whose father is sick. So there are several boys, and you want to be very specific so that someone knows exactly which boy you're talking about. There, so you'd say, there is the boy whose father is sick. Again, a boy is a person, so you use the pronoun whose. But in this case, you can also use the personal pronoun that. There is the boy, okay? There is the boy whose father is sick. Now, in this case, we cannot use that, okay? Because we only substitute which. When it is the dog which has just barked. You can always say it is the dog that has just barked, okay? But when it comes for whose, here is the boy whose father is sick, okay? We only use that for people, are, and animals, okay? There is the boy whose father is sick. G, it is the cat whose owner visited us. It is the cat whose owner visited us. Okay? It is the cat whose owner visited us. Now, I would like to point out that we use the personal pronoun whose. It's a very, very, very special relative pronoun because it refers to, it shows who possesses what, who owns what, to whom does something belong. If you go back to F, there is the boy whose father is sick. Okay, so here, this particular in this particular sentence, what you get to know is that the father, okay, that particular boy, there is the boy whose father is sick. So the boy belongs to the father, and the father is sick. There is the boy whose father is sick. Okay. G, it is the cat whose owner visited us. So the cat belongs to the owner, and that's why we are using whose. So be very careful with that particular relative pronoun. Whose, we use it to show possessiveness, to show that something belongs to somebody else. If you want more details about that, please have a look at my video about relative pronouns. Now, H. She is a girl that bullied me, or she is a girl who bullied me. So imagine that there are several girls that are standing outside and you want someone to know exactly which girl bullied you. So then you would say she. See, she is a girl who bullied me. Or you can say she is a girl that bullied me. Okay? You can use that, or you can replace that with who in this case, because we also use that for people, animals, and things. I always tell my students, when you're confused about which relative pronoun to use, then always try that. That will often work unless you're talking about possession, because if you're talking about possession, then you have to use whose. Now, it is the cow that I milked, or it is the cow which I milked. In this case, you want to specify which particular cow it is that you're talking about. There are lots of cows. You want to be very specific about which particular cow you milked. So, it is the cow that I milked, or it is the cow which I milked, or you can say there is the cow that I milked. J. This is the tooth that is broken, or this is the tooth which is broken. Okay, so imagine that you're sitting at the dentist's chair and you want the dentist to know which tooth is giving you problems. So then you would point at it, okay, and say this is the tooth which is broken, or this is the tooth that is broken. I mean, our mouth is full of teeth, so you want to be very specific so that the dentist does not remove the wrong tooth. So you would use the relative clause, this is the tooth. See, this is the tooth which is broken, or this is the tooth that is broken. Okay, so as we move on to the second section of the lesson, remember you use relative clauses when you want to specify who or what you're talking about, or to give extra information. And to do that, you use relative pronouns. And we have looked at several examples of how to do that. Now, let us move on to number 3. Use relative pronouns to join sentences together. So, another function that we have for relative clauses is that we use them to join sentences together. And this happens a lot, especially when you're writing. Sometimes you could be asked in a test, for example, or an exam, join the following sentences together using a relative pronoun. Okay? You could be asked to join the following sentences together using a relative pronoun. Now, how do you do it? Here are some examples. Example 3a. The film is good. I saw the film last week. So imagine that you had to join those two sentences together using a relative pronoun. How do you do it? You use the correct relative pronoun. Now look at the answer. The film which I saw last week is good. The film that I saw last week is good. Remember, a film is a thing. So remember rule number 2E. Use that for people, animals, or things. But you can also use which, because we use which for animals and things. So the film that I saw last week is good. Okay? The film that I saw last week is good. So is good comes at the end of the sentence because you want to give extra emphasis on the film that you saw last week. Okay? Example 3b. The man is sick. The man plays the piano. Okay? So, again, you want to be very specific about this man. Which man are we talking about here? So, the man who plays the piano is sick. Or the man that plays the piano is sick. Remember that we use relative clauses. We use them to be very specific about who or what we are talking about, or to give more details. So in example 3a, you have more details, okay, about the film which I saw last week. And in example B, we are very specific about which man we are talking about. The man who plays the piano. Okay? Look at example C. The dentist removed my tooth. The dentist is sick. Okay? The dentist to whom I went to have my tooth removed is sick. The dentist to whom I went to have my tooth removed is sick. Remember, we use a preposition with a relative pronoun whom. Okay? D. The man visited us last week. His dog has died. So, we want to know more about this man. The man whose dog has died visited us last week. Which man are we talking about? The man whose dog has died visited us last week. Okay? Now, remember I said that we use the relative pronoun whose for possession. So, this dog belongs to the man. That's why we are using whose. The man whose dog has died visited us last week. Then look at E. Example 3E. The car has broken down. I bought the car last year. Okay? So, the car which I bought last year has broken down, or the car that I bought last year has broken down. Now, look at example F. The flight has been cancelled. I booked the flight months ago. It becomes the flight which I booked months ago has been cancelled. The flight which I booked months ago has been cancelled. Now, what you notice in all those sentences, when you combine them together, when you join them together using the relative pronoun, the verbs come at the end of it, okay? Because what is important, what comes first is the information, okay, that specifies who or what you're talking about, or the extra information that you're giving about a person or a thing. The film which I saw last week. The man who plays the piano. The dentist to whom I went to have my tooth removed. The man whose dog has died. The car that I bought last year. The flight which I booked months ago. So you see, all those sentences that I have read are actually they're giving us, they're relative clauses that are giving us specific information about who or what we are talking about, okay? And they're also giving us more information about the person or the thing that we are talking about. The first example, 3a, tells us more about the film. The second example tells us more about the man. The next one tells us more about the dentist. The next one tells us more about the man. And the next one tells us more about the car. And the last one tells us more about the flight. Which flight? The flight which I booked months ago. Okay? Now, I hope that you now understand relative clauses. I hope you understand why we use them. I hope you also understand how we form them, how we create them, that is by using relative pronouns. And finally, I hope you now know how to join sentences together using relative pronouns. If you found this lesson useful and informative, if you learned something new, please subscribe to the channel for more educative videos on English grammar and English vocabulary, and also videos that help you to know how to say different things when you're with different people. Like, for example, I have videos on how to speak with a dentist or an optician in English, what to say when you go for to check in for your flight, what to say when you go to the hairdressers. There are lots and lots of useful videos that I would recommend that you have a look at. So, have you subscribed? No, excellent, thank you. Now, this brings me to the end of this lesson. Thank you for watching and see you in our next lesson. Bye bye.